Sekeres Price for Friday, June 7th, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And if you need meeting space, event space, wedding space, incredible space here at the Wall Center, indoor and outdoor. Email sales@wallcenter.com about your next event. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, Grace Sass, hitting switches, conducting things. Big show coming up. All brought to you by Applewood Auto Group.
Applewood Nissan in Langley's got the 2024 Rogue, a perfect size vehicle just to do everything you needed to do here in BC. Lease it from just 2.99%. Go take it for a test drive. You'll fall in love. It's all at Applewood Nissan in Langley. It's all good at Applewood.
Poll question today asking you who's back next season. Zadorov, Lindholm, neither. Both. You can vote at Sekeres Price, YouTube and Twitter or X. I voted Zadorov here. I think there's a big case for neither, but I voted Zadorov here simply because I think he won them over in the playoffs, and I think they can make a last pitch here and appeal to, a new home in Vancouver. Might be wishful thinking, but really enjoyed not only watching him play, but listening to him talk this year. So I voted Zadorov, although I could have cast my vote in a couple of places.
You could also argue that Zadorov is a rarer commodity. He's a left shot defenseman, we know, but he's a beast, a big beast with snarl. And to find guys like that can also play the sport of hockey is tough to find. Versus Lindholm, if you lose out on Lindholm, is there a way to salvage your forward set for next year? Yeah, there is. Pretty easy way to do that. There's a lot of free agents out there, and I think you can you could even focus on just a surefire top six. Signing Lindholm gets you into the top 9 thoughts, right? Okay, a good top 9. How do we have a good top 9? If you lose out on him, you don't think you can replace him with another surefire third line center.
Yeah.
Then you focus on a ironclad top 6.
In an ideal world, if you had a bunch of cheap contributors on the wing and on defense, I would be all for re-signing Elias Lindholm and stacking 3 terrific centermen. Now, I do think you have a difficult pitch to make to him there. Come play third line center here when many other places in the NHL he's going to play second line center, probably play first line center for some teams. I would also take on that he's the scarcer commodity. I mean, a right shot top 2 center is pretty scarce as well, but that's debatable. Fair enough. But the fact of the matter is the Vancouver Canucks want to build a championship team. You need multiple wingers in here, right? Like we're several wingers short here. A true team that you think can win the Stanley Cup. Remember, they didn't even get halfway there this year. And then secondly, on defense, so you're hoping to squeeze whatever you can out of Myers over these next couple of years. You got Susie under contract for 2 more years. You got to re-sign Ronic. He's going to cost you money. And then you're really rebuilding around that group already this year, not to mention there's a lot more work to be done with that group in the coming years. So I would argue that if you commit $7 million to Elias Lindholm per season here right now, I think that significantly robs your ability to add the necessary wingers and continue to reshape the defense so that both are championship-worthy units as well. And again, Demko was under contract for 2 more years. Quinn Hughes is under contract for 3 more years. So you've got to think about ways to construct your cup contender in that period of time.
You're not going to solve all of these issues in one offseason here, right? You're not going
to. But that's it. Yeah. Is I think re-signing Lindholm makes it even more difficult to solve some of those issues. Like, I'm all for stacking 3 centers. I'm all for needing a great third line center to win a cup. But, putting the 3 centers in place and then going out and saying we need like 5 to fill 5 other holes and can, in some cases, big holes. I just don't think that's going to allow you enough cap dollars to solve that, to solve that riddle.
Let me ask you this. If they don't get Lindholm,
Mhm.
do they go out and try to find a $5 million centerman, or do they just try to find something cheaper if they find another centerman at all, or just try to go with the likes of Oman and Suter and get surefire wingers to bolster the Pettersson line? Which do you think?
Yeah.
Which do you think they do for next year?
I think Patrick Allvin really likes the idea of 3 centermen. He mentioned it several times during the course of the season, including at the year-end press conference.
Not a lot of mid-range availability, though.
Yeah. So I think Allvin is looking at it, constructing it that way. I'd be quite interested to hear what Tocchet has to say about it. But, let me ask you, you say $5 million. Sean Monahan is projected as a $5.3 million player by AFP Analytics. Alex Wenberg is projected as a $3.85 million player. Adam Henrique is projected at a $4.3 million player. So, I think there are avenues, not to mention whatever centers may be on the trade market. So I think there are other avenues to filling third line center capably at somewhere between half and 66% of the cost of Lindholm, which allows you further resources to deploy on defense or on the wing.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what all those guys come in at age-wise or money-wise. You just don't want to sign these guys to long-term. Like, all those guys are all in the same 29-year-old range. All of them are looking for that last final big contract. So you've got to be careful about what you're signing up for and not hemming yourself in. Like, not a lot of these guys have shown signs of aging gracefully. Monahan's had a great bounce back year, but are you convinced that he's able to continue that for 5 more years if that's what he's looking for? Man, very risky. I'd be far more inclined. And again, there's the trade route too, and you'd have to show it to me for me to provide opinion on that. If you can find something via the trade route that gets you a little bit, not younger as a team, but younger than 29-year-old centerman, yeah, by all means, I'd be willing to look at that.
Well, that brings us to our top story, and it is Elias Lindholm, 7x7. The reporting is out there that the Canucks are making the offer. That the Canucks are making the offer tells me that Allvin wants to go down this road of the 3 centermen, but it also makes me wonder whether there's a world where the Vancouver Canucks are considering re-signing Lindholm and trading Elias Pettersson for a boatload of assets that could possibly fix all the holes on the roster. I know a lot of Elias Pettersson fans don't want to hear it, but this is something that general managers and hockey executives have to contemplate. They have to look at all avenues. And after a poor performance in the playoffs, after what seems to be not on the same page with his head coach with regards to the difference between hurt and injury, and more on that in a second. And, of course, after the Carolina Hurricanes came calling at the trade deadline, you do wonder whether there's anything on a whiteboard in Allvin or Rutherford's office going, okay, what about re-signing Lindholm and seeing what we can get for Pettersson? Because you have to think that's going to be 3 to 4 plum assets, several of which could step into the hockey club immediately.
Well, that's the thing. How many teams can offer up usable assets right now? Because that's what the Canucks are going to be looking for. They're not going to be looking for picks and prospects.
No.
So that's what makes that trade difficult, if they even want to. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, maybe, because this is the one time you got to make this assessment because the no trade clause kicks in after this coming season. I don't think that this offer is enough to make me convinced that is any closer to fruition than it was previous. I think there's, I'd put the percentage points in probably the single digits that the Elias Pettersson trade would happen. And I don't think this a contract offer for Elias Lindholm changes that for me, changes that equation. It's possible. But what team would be willing to sacrifice that many ready-to-use pieces?
Well, I mean, I think, let's say it's a 4-asset return. I think 2 of them would absolutely be step in immediately, and 2 of them could be futures or perhaps one on the verge sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. 2 certified ready-to-use pieces, though.
Well, let's just play it out with Carolina. Necas and Kotkaniemi. Then like a player on the verge and a first-round pick. And look, I know Carolina's looking to reap prospects and assets for futures for Necas.
Mm-hmm.
So I realize it's an imperfect example, but something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, I never say never. I think they would certainly entertain those thoughts, especially after the comments we heard from Rick Tocchet.
Well, just about to get into it. Tocchet on 650 called it a big summer for Pete.
Back to the big summer.
Big summer.
Big launch.
Wants to see him as one of the top 3 in-shape guys. And I don't think that's a commentary that Elias Pettersson wasn't in the best shape. I think that's a commentary on if you're going to make $11.5 million and be one of our leaders and franchise players and all that, you've got to set the example much like Hank and Danny did for all those years.
Well, the quote at the end there, all the successful teams, the leadership group, they go to another level.
Right. And that's very much the Sidney Crosby citation, right? That we heard a lot of in the early days of this regime, Rutherford, Alvin, and then Tocchet after he came over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Sedins, as you mentioned. I mean, those guys were
but
freaks.
I mean, their experience was Sidney Crosby was the hardest worker, the most in shape, the most dedicated, the most serious, the most in the field, the best practice player, like all of those things. And I think that's the sort of culture that they're trying to instill, particularly with Elias Pettersson.
Yeah. And
don't be a wallflower. Don't be, the guy on the side. Don't be the guy in clique conversations. Be the guy at the center. Be the leader.
And you have to be an Iron Man.
Be the guy driving everybody else.
You have to be an Iron Man where, it makes it easier to play through injury because of the kind of condition you're in and the fact that you won't wear down and that you can dominate. And where other guys, at that point in the season, and then within that, again, the point in a game where everybody else is wearing down, but you're not.
Yeah.
And that's what gets you that upper hand.
And here's the other thing is oftentimes to be that singular franchise player, team leader, it's going to alienate you from the group a little bit. There'll be some in the group that look at you and go, oh, he's kind of like a pseudo coach. Nathan McKinnon in Colorado is a great example of this. He wasn't taking any shit a few years ago. No. We're having chickpea pasta at the buffet. It's healthier.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to force my teammates to eat healthy. Oh, they don't like it. They're going to grumble. Don't care.
No more bagels.
Yeah, exactly. No, but you've got to be willing to be that guy, Blake. And not everybody's personality is set up that way. I think, frankly, that Hank really benefited from effectively having a co-captain in Danny, right? They were able to do it as a duo, as opposed to, you see this in the NFL a lot. Quarterbacks. There are a lot of players on football teams with an established quarterback whereby they're a little bit scared of the starting quarterback. MFIC, and the IC stands for in charge. You walk past the quarterback in the hallway, straighten up a little bit. That's the sort of player presence that I think Tocchet is trying to get to with his best players.
I don't think he makes comments like this, though, if they have serious thoughts of trading them. Like, this is still a coach trying to motivate this player and trying to get the best out of this player.
Well, but those are parallel tracks, Blake. Like, Tocchet is going to coach the player and coach the player to the best he sees fit. Management may have their own ideas.
Yeah. I mean, this is a pretty integrated coaching staff, though, with into management.
I understand, but I don't think a single thing would change for Tocchet if Alvin and Rutherford went to him and said, oh, by the way, we're going to entertain offers on the player this summer. I think Rick's position would be, well, okay, that's great, but if
yeah,
it's here in September, here's what I need.
No,
so
we're going to the guy that
we're going to proceed down this
in front of
track
you.
until you tell me he's no longer a Vancouver Canuck.
Mhm.
I'll coach whoever gets off the bus. So,
not impossible. I mean, you concede though it is a longer shot. Yes,
very
okay.
much so. I've said it, since we started unpacking that bizarre end of season day.
Yeah,
that it's highly unlikely, but Jim Rutherford has shown us he's a ruthless guy. Go back and look at what he said about Boudreaux. So I would suspect that the Vancouver Canucks are going to explore, like I said, have a whiteboard out there with all avenues. And that includes, this is our last opportunity to trade this player. Do we think we can win a cup with him? What else is out there? What are teams willing to pay for him? And are we better off with Lindholm at $7 million, $4.5 million of cap space, plus a boatload of assets coming if we trade Pettersson? They have to consider those sorts of things. This is what managers do.
We are inside 4 weeks now until free agency.
Yes.
Which is and we've sort of earmarked ourselves.
And the cup final hasn't even started, which is so bizarre. But,
as you know, we've been conditioned the last 10 years in this market to having these never-ending conversations about next year. They're not never-ending. They end in a few weeks here. All of a sudden, feels like they just stopped playing.
Damnedest thing when you go to 7 games
round 2. Like, it's beautiful. Isn't this fun, folks?
Great.
We don't have to over-masticate these issues. It's almost here. Like, in 3 weeks' time, you're going to have a pretty darn good 3 weeks. You're going to have a pretty darn good idea of what Canucks 24-25 look like.
Really hit home for me Wednesday when Saravelli said, well, the Ronic thing, they got about 20 days. And I was like, shoot, they do.
Yeah. It's pretty exciting. Like, there's news to be had here in the short term. And who knows? Drafts have a funny way of creating news as well.
Yeah.
Maybe the Canucks are going to strike early as Jim Rutherford did, of course, during the season.
Well, and that's the other thing. Rutherford is not too dissimilar. Rutherford and Alvin are not too dissimilar from Jim Benning in this regard, and perhaps narrowly just this regard. They're courage of their conviction managers. Like, Jim often got it wrong, but Jim knew what he was doing. He was
within his own mind.
Yeah. No, but he was, this team needs veterans and tougher guys to insulate our young players. I'm going out and signing Roussel and signing Beagle. Now, bad contracts, but he knew what he wanted to do. Rutherford and Alvin are very much been the same way. And the example is the defense corps last year. They agreed with their head coach. They needed to get bigger and more physical on defense. Susie, Cole, Zadorov in season.
Yeah.
Once they identify something, they pursue it clearly and with conviction. So I'm quite interested to see what they have coming up for us here in the next 3 weeks. All right. Move along. We're going to get back to Zadorov in a second. But Sportsnet has released its staffing for the Stanley Cup final. And Luke Gazdic is not a part of it. And haven't seen, or I'm sure, if need be, questioned on it. I'm sure they would protect him and say, oh, no, this was always going to be the case. You can't have everyone at the Cup final. But you do wonder whether the diatribe against Canucks fans helped create this situation where, Luke, maybe you sit this one out. You shit on our second biggest market with sweeping generalizations. Maybe let's just... In fact, I saw Ryan Henderson, our old colleague, said one viewer wrote into them and, about Gazdic and what he said about Canucks fans and the Canucks, and got a reply from Rogers, Sportsnet. Luke is relatively new to broadcasting on the national stage, and having millions of people watching him every night comes with an elevated level of scrutiny. As Luke was preparing to appear on the podcast, he received vile personal attacks towards himself and his family on social media. The content of these social comments was completely unacceptable and crossed the line. Luke's response on the podcast was an emotional one, and he made the mistake of taking what some people said to him online and generalized about the entire Canucks fan base. He understands his conduct was inappropriate, and we're confident it won't happen again. So if you were looking for a mea culpa, I'm sorry, on the broadcast Saturday, it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
Maybe we're to do it without him there.
Well, and yeah, I mean, all of that is exactly what we were talking about on, when was it, Tuesday?
Yeah.
Whatever day this week it reared its head. Yeah. There are going to be people, especially anonymous people on social media, who go way over the line. But, you know, Elon Musk has owned Twitter for, what, a year or two now? I just don't think he's going to solve it and make it the most civil place.
No.
I'm just taking
adding to the incivility.
Yeah, like, so Twitter's not changing. So this is the reality of the situation you're in. That, yeah, there's going to be a lot of terrible shit coming your way. You got several options. Read and ignore. Don't read. Turn off the comments. Don't engage in social media. There are a lot of avenues you can pursue. So, you know, that at least this email response to this viewer who complained, you know, gets to the pertinent issues that, Luke can't respond like that going forward.
Now, you can also look at it that he's just the junior guy there. That,
well,
you know, there's only 4 seats. There's only 4
what I
seats.
suspect they'll say.
Yeah.
If press further.
I mean, truthfully, there's only 4 seats there. You're not taking Elliot or Rudy or BX off of the panel at this point in the proceedings. Jennifer's pretty green too, but I'm sure they don't want the optics.
She's more experienced than that.
Yes. Yeah. So,
and all that's true, but you know, if this email's to be believed, the word mistake was used. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Little from column A, little from column B.
Yeah.
But to me, the most interesting part is that they're just not going to address it. Like, again, what you just read was a private response to one person. It doesn't appear there's going to be any sort of public comment
unless Luke avails himself of his own social channels,
I guess. Yeah,
right? Like there's that possibility.
Yeah.
As well. Okay. Elliot Friedman on Nikita Zadorov says he believes there is a number that's somewhat less than market value that the Canucks are talking about, and that isn't far away from the sales price on Zadorov. Says he's willing to give them a bit of a break, but they have to get to his number. So Dollywall continues to say no progress, nothing concrete. And of course, we had Dan Milstein yesterday calling Ian McIntyre's report that traction was made with Zadorov. Fake news. We also have Mrs. Zadorov, Nikita's wife, on social media with a post captioned "Last Days in Vancouver," which read into it what you will.
Yeah, it could mean for the season, could mean ever. and I mean, truthfully, from her perspective, the future is uncertain.
Oh, for sure.
He's a free agent. She doesn't know if she's ever back.
And God bless the wives of professional athletes, because, you know, they live in a community. Their husbands are gone a lot, right? Half the time, basically in season.
Like being a diplomat's family.
No, exactly. You establish friend groups, play dates, all that within a community, and it can all change within a moment.
The rug's pulled. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes involuntarily by trade.
That's right.
Right.
And she just experienced that from Calgary. Yeah.
In November, she was living in Calgary. They were looking for a change. They got to Vancouver. From all accounts, Nikita said they love it here. And, well, how much less are you willing to take to maintain your abode here in Vancouver?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the decision that faces a lot of these players, certainly these free agents, as we head to July 1st. I do sort of wonder if the Canucks are holding out here, and that, you know, prior to the draft, there's going to be one last overture. Okay, Nikita, here you go. Last and best.
Maybe. I think they really like the player. I think they want the player, but I don't think they're willing to put themselves in a precarious position for the player.
Well, I think they really like the player. I think Tocchet really likes the player. And I wonder whether that is going to push them a little further than maybe Alvin and Rutherford on their own would want to go. I also think what we talked about yesterday has a little more credence than really has been given credit for. When I read everything about Zadorov, he turned into your second paired defenseman in the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
He played several more minutes per night than Carson Soucy. His athletic tools, the movement skills, the puck skills are superior to Carson Soucy. I think you're looking at a guy who could reasonably be expected to be your second pair left side guy next season, with Soucy moving down to a third pair role. I just don't know how steadfast they're going to be on, we're paying Hughes, we've paid Soucy, paying a third left side guy is luxury, particularly when we have needs, be it on the right side of defense. And
that's
we know Ronic's going to get the raise, and on the wing and at third line center.
That was my previous point, that they'd love to have him back, but there's already guys getting paid. There's a major deficiency on the right side, and as much as you love the guy,
well, there's a major deficiency on the right side if something happens with Ronic or Myers.
No.
If you're re-signing Ronic and you're re-signing Myers, I think you feel good about the right side this year with Jolson as the third pair guy. You're not particularly deep there. You know, you're probably going to have to go back to do more work on that side next summer, but I think you can feel reasonably okay about your right side.
If you're trying to improve the defense, Tyler Myers is your third pair right side.
I hear you, Blake, but asking to pay Ronic and then bring in another right side top four guy, that is an enormous ask, my dude.
In what sense?
Well, top four right side guys cost a hell of a lot of money.
Well, I don't think Brett Pesce is not going to be that much more than Zadorov. I would rather they sign Brett Pesce than they sign Nikita Zadorov.
Okay. But it's an either or thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. You can't all of a sudden have 12 million tied up in those two guys.
Okay.
So
I thought you were talking about that in the context of Zadorov coming back.
I'm saying that's the problem with this Zadorov thing. You want him back, but you spend $6 million on that guy, let's just say. Well, then you can't have Brett Pesce on the right side of that second pair.
Yeah.
And of course, Brett Pesce on the right side, and I'm just, drilling down on Pesce just because I think he's a nice player. Having a player like that gives you another option with Quinn Hughes. That if Ronic gets injured or there's a chemistry issue and that bubble bursts, that you've got another guy that you can play with Quinn Hughes.
Yeah.
And the Canucks don't have that right now. Like, what if Ronic got injured? What, they signed Ronic to $8 million per year and he gets injured in November? What do you do?
I mean, hey, what if somebody got injured in a Twitter discourse right now with a Canucks fan who goes, well, Lindholm, what if Pettersson or Miller got injured? Well, sure. Yeah, great.
No, but that's
he slots up and replaces one of them as a center. And if you don't have him re-signed, then you don't have that luxury. But if you're losing Pettersson or Miller to injury, much like if you're losing Philip Ronic to injury, but there is no replacing them.
Well, no, of course, but you at least do. If one of Miller or Pettersson gets injured, you still have a top line center.
Mm-hmm.
If Ronic gets injured, you do not have a top pair defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference. There is depth at center, even if there's only two guys. There's no depth right now on the right side.
Fair enough. Depth on the right side. Easier said than done.
No, for sure. But I mean, of all the years, this might be the year, though.
Well, I don't know. For the moment, I'm very skeptical that Pesce would look to sign here. I mean, an American guy who has spent the entirety of his career south of the line. From New York State. I don't know. I'd be very surprised if I know there may be. Does he post-date Rutherford in Carolina? He was drafted in 2013. So Jim was still in Carolina then. But, whatever the history be, I'd be very surprised on if Pesce landed here. Much like with Gensel, who we've already seen the report from Murph Gafar that he's going to sign south of the line, and Carolina shopping his rights for a mid-round pick. If there's a team out there that thinks they can get Gensel to sign before July 1st, may well be a decent investment of a mid-round pick. Stefan Roget of Canucks Army, speaking of Ronic, did a piece on potential trade spots for Philip Ronic and listed no fewer than 13. I mean, to tell you what kind of demand the player, it's almost absolute, right? And frankly, there could probably be more. But Anaheim, Carolina, Columbus, Dallas, Florida, Minnesota, Nashville, Islanders, Ottawa, Seattle, Toronto, Utah, and Winnipeg, just to name 13. Look, I don't think they're considering trading Ronic, at least not as of this minute. I agree with what Saravelli has long been saying on this, and that is you got a Norris Trophy winning season, a Quinn Hughes, in part because this guy was beside him. You turned your team around, one of the best turnarounds, the best turnaround in the National Hockey League under Rick Tocchet. Ronic was a really big part of that. And of course, it is a very difficult position to replace if you're moving on for the player, save a like for like trade. But let's play it out. You're trading Ronic. What do you think? You get his replacement and something? You're happy to just get his replacement?
You're happy to get his replacement if it's a younger player. It's like a 24-year-old or something like that. But if you're getting an older player, then you want extra. Like if you're trading Ronic for a nice 29-year-old right shot defenseman, then you hope it comes with some sugar. So depends on the guy.
Yeah, I have so much trouble even seeing you get commensurate value. Again, we talked to Frank about this for Wednesday. When the acquiring team knows they're in the same contract pickle you're in.
Except if they get younger. Except if they've got a guy that, and this is how I painted it originally.
Except if
the acquiring team gets younger.
Okay.
By acquiring Ronic.
Okay.
And maybe they've overpaid for said 29-year-old defenseman. So they've got a good defenseman, a true right shot guy, but he's a tad overpaid and he's 29.
So then that's what's coming back.
So then they're happy to get younger and control the price on Ronic. They're narrow paths.
Yeah, very narrow. Yeah. Very, very narrow.
They're very narrow paths.
No talks with Casey DeSmith. It doesn't sound like there's interest in bringing him back. So, Artie, it's your gig.
Yeah.
You're probably going a little down market from DeSmith to bring in that third organizational goaltender for next.
Yeah. The Louis Domingue.
For next year.
Yes.
Speaking of goaltending, Roberto Luongo, Florida Panthers executive, opportunity to get that Stanley Cup ring. I think there would be a lot of people in this community, Canucks fans, who would be quite happy if Roberto Luongo, A, got the ring that was eluded him in 2011, and B, did so with a victory over the Edmonton Oilers. Secondly, on goaltending, we both saw this morning and just sort of eyes bugged out. Paul Paduti, who does really fantastic work at Adjusted Hockey, is the follow there. Love his timeline. So he went through goaltending in the Stanley Cup playoffs using adjusted goals saved above league average save percentage to determine what were the best statistical runs for a goalie with every franchise ever. Well, since expansion. Okay. Since expansion. So top goalie playoff runs by franchise. And the Vancouver Canucks run, the best, remains King Richard Brodeur in 1982 in their underdog Cinderella run to the final. 42 years ago. But there's more. King Richard, goal saved above average, 23. There are only 2 goalies who have had better runs in the Stanley Cup playoffs, according to Paul in this formula.
Were they notable goalies?
Patrick Roy in 1993, taking that Habs team to a Cup championship.
Yeah. And anybody
And
else we've
some
heard
guy
of?
from Boston in 2011, who's now in a Michigan bunker with lots of potable water and canned beans.
And a lot of tires that are pumped to maximum PSI.
Yeah. And the thing is, because I quote tweeted that, Paul responded, and it goes, I was really surprised. Kirk McLean is second on the Canucks list, 94 plus 19, which compares very favorably to a lot of these other franchises.
Yeah.
Luongo in 2007.
Yep. 2 rounds deep.
Plus 11 in the second round loss to the Ducks. Like, just in that round, he was plus 11.
And some of that was played from the toilet.
Yeah. And Demko, in just the 3 starts against Vegas in the bubble, plus 9. So the moral of the story is the Canucks have received, in the totality of NHL and Stanley Cup playoff history, again, by Paul's model, like an overabundance of extraordinary goaltending performances vis-a-vis the other franchises in the league.
Here's a challenge to Paul, because we've opined on this before, but without actual, data to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
The Canucks have had one of the better goaltended franchises in the last 40 years.
Well, certainly since Louis got here.
No, but yeah. I mean, certainly the last 20 years at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the long run of goalies. It's
been extraordinary.
It's been really good.
Well,
and
especially some of those guys playing in front of terrible teams, right? Like Miller, Markstrom, and Demko all played in front of some pretty wretched teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, Dan Cloutier has a very bad playoff rep, but Dan Cloutier in the regular season was just fine in the early aughts. So goaltending has rarely been the problem for the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah. Young stars in Penticton. Announcement from the Canucks yesterday, Friday, September 13th at the South Okanagan Event Center. It is a magnificent event if you ever get a chance to go to the SOEC or Penticton, and of course stop by Neighborhood and Yellow Dog right downtown there.
Yeah.
Have a blast there. So looking forward to that.
They don't have the schedule out yet, folks, but you can probably
game schedule.
Yeah, we can probably comfortably book for the weekend, though. They do generally have one of the 2 nights off, Friday or Saturday night, the Canucks do. So make sure you're in town for both of the nights if you want to book right now.
Right. And once again, the same contingent of Canadian clubs will be there as well. Calgary, Edmonton, and Winnipeg. Just so pleased that they brought that event back.
Sure.
Okay. Parlay challenge. The Daily Face-Off. We've been telling you about this throughout the playoffs. You want to go to games.dailyfaceoff.com. We're about to start a new round here. So, a reminder, you go to games.dailyfaceoff.com, you sign up, it takes a few seconds. You'll be shown a series of prop bets on the game that night or the game tomorrow, as the case may be. You pick which side you're on. Nightly winners win gift cards. Round winners win cash. Blake Price has been playing for us. What we got?
Oilers and Panthers game 1. I've got Panthers winning game number 1. I've got it on the under. I don't think they're going to get too score happy here. I think by this point, everybody knows how to play defense, and it'll be fairly locked down. I do think the Oilers score an early power play goal, as they are wont to do. So I got them as the first goal on the board. High scoring period, the second. Barkov over on the assists. McDavid over on the assists. Zach Hyman under on the goals. Reinhardt over on the goals. And my usual 55 shot tiebreaker as well, if it comes to pass.
You go standard 55?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the worst idea.
Low shots.
Yeah. Refresh me. Were the Panthers and or Oilers getting a positive. It has been a positive shots in the conference finals, like it was for the Canucks.
Yeah, I mean, to see both teams in the 30s is just not happening these days.
No,
It's just not like it's a. And again, I'm not sure if we attach that to actually any difference in play, or if it's just this new standard of shot keeping, if you will.
Quality over quantity. Well, I got a few things to say as well about the Cup final. Brings us to the welcome, Matt.
Let's get into it. I don't know if it was malicious. Probably not. But I do know it was another WTF moment. My question to ownership would be, was it worth it? And the architect, and I use that term loosely, given there wasn't much architecture, more finger painting with this team. It's like the running of the Bulls in Pamplona. You know someone is going to get hurt.
That's what you all need to understand here, right now.
Memo to the Edmonton Oilers and their fans. I'm sure you've dissected this Stanley Cup final from most every angle, evaluated strengths and weaknesses of both clubs, identified pathways to victory and a championship over the Florida Panthers. But there's one thing that probably escaped your analysis: the Campbell factor. Take it from us here in Vancouver. Don't discount that Gregory Campbell is a Florida Panthers AGM. We didn't think much of the Boston Bruins fourth-line center in 2011. Didn't think he'd have that much of effect on a series. Then Aaron Rome hit Nathan Horton and got one of the longest suspensions in the history of the Cup final, 4 games. That suspension was handed down by NHL executive Mike Murphy, who was filling in for his boss. Colin Campbell, you may have to remember, had to recuse himself from the role of NHL disciplinarian because son Gregory was competing for the Boston Bruins. Murphy admitted that, being thrust into the role, he consulted Brian Burke, former NHL disciplinarian, former Canucks executive, in deliberating the Aaron Rome suspension. Of course, everyone in BC knew that Brian Burke was on bad terms with Canucks chairman Francesco Aquilini and then GM Mike Gillis. Rome's hit was late, caused injury, was deserving of supplemental discipline. But 4 games in the final, that's somewhere between 8 and 48 games in the regular season, depending on who you ask. Prevailing wisdom, 1 game playoff suspension is like 2 games in the regular season. But how about this? Brendan Shanahan, 2012, when he was NHL disciplinarian. Quote, if you think about it, that 1 game in the finals is the equivalent of a 12-game suspension.
Interesting.
Jason Bruff's byline on that story, actually, for NBC back in 2012.
No kidding.
So the Canucks felt hard done by, and rightfully so. Colin Campbell had already admitted in emails that he was a venting hockey dad when he questioned his underling, director of officiating Stephen Walcom, about penalties against Gregory's team. In no other world than Gary Bettman's do you get a venting hockey dad and in charge of on-ice officiating, whereby you abuse power to vent at those in your charge. That has a chilling effect and directs future behavior. It's atrocious management, and in most realms would be grounds for dismissal. Colin Campbell remains employed by the NHL, albeit in a different role. A lack of transparency continues to dog NHL officiating. The NHL itself remains an old boys club, and Bettman continues not to recognize the conflict of interest in his midst, nor subscribe to transparency. You've been warned, Edmonton. So welcome, Matt, for today. We invite your feedback. Feedback channels as follows on email live at sekeresprice.com. Can text 778-402-9680. It's the Great Clips text message inbox. On Twitter, I'm at Sekeres Price. Welcome at presentation of Northlands Golf Course. 6 to 90-day reservations for a $10 per player fee based on availability. Details, golfnorthlands.com.
Worse yet, Nathan Horton is also an ex-Panther. So perhaps he'll be in the ear. Remember what happened to me. Don't let it happen again.
Well, it's just, so I was looking in this final earlier in the week. I was like, oh, Gregory Campbell. He works for the Florida Panthers.
Mhm.
What could possibly go wrong? Menu today brought to you by Greta Bar, 50 West Cordova. Fantastic spot. Pre-game, post-game. Watch the game there and check out the cool arcade. Tons of fun at halftime or intermission. 50 West Cordova, GretaBar.com. We're going to be joined by Frank Corrado, TSN hockey analyst, former Vancouver Canuck. We'll talk about Luke Gazdic and Canucks Twitter. We'll talk about, the Canucks prospect he just covered. Josh Bloom scored the Memorial Cup winning goal. We'll talk about these free agents, not to mention talk a little about Martin Necas of the Carolina Hurricanes, still not traded, and the Stanley Cup final itself. Bet365. Bets of the day, this segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres Price. Well, first of all, congratulations on the victory in the CFL opener last night.
Yeah, nailed that one.
And frankly, I am just going to heed your word here, because really the first week of the CFL brings even more unknowns than most leagues. Like, because there's more player turnover, there's more new
Micro
players,
preseason.
there's more variables, right? So as Blake said earlier this week, when taking the points with the Alouettes against Winnipeg, it's just good practice. I mean, there's the game tonight, the game tomorrow are both just 1 point spreads, so there's not a lot of there.
No road dogs per se.
Well, no, I think one of them's a road dog, but the Argos are getting 5.5 points at home Sunday against BC.
Oh,
well, and I realize Chad Kelly isn't the quarterback anymore, but that was a pretty damn good team outside of the quarterback. Offenses sometimes can be behind defenses early in the season. Special teams can sometimes be an adventure in week one. So I'm just going to take the points.
Wow.
5.5 with a home team that won 16 games last year and go tickety-boo into the night or the afternoon, 4 p.m. kickoff.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to game one of the Stanley Cup final. Multiple points. Oh, they've adjusted. It was previous. A moment ago, or not a moment ago, maybe
it changed right there before your
like
eyes?
an hour ago, and I
okay.
checked. 2 points for McDavid was less than even money. Like, it was just a fait accompli. He was getting 2. But I like the value of Leon Draisaitl getting 2 points. Plus 195 for Draisaitl to get 2 points. Boy, that could be a first period power play and something else. So I'm going Draisaitl plus 195, 2.9.
Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VAN bonus altogether, all one word. Frank Corrado coming up next.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the net. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Northlands Golf Course. Download the free app and book tee times with a touch of your thumb. And while you're on course, open the app for hole-by-hole GPS and track your score. 6 to 90-day reservations. Jump the queue. Lock in your date for $10 per player booking fee. Limited daily availability. Check it all out. GolfNorthlands.com. We've all heard of the overdose crisis, also known as the toxic drug crisis.
But did you know that it affects men disproportionately?
Last year, 78% of people dying here in BC were men, and the majority were 30 to 59 years old.
It's not easy to struggle with addiction, and the stigma around it can make it harder for people to reach out for help.
There is help and support. Every journey is different, and the thing that helps one person, it might not be the same for everyone.
So when someone does reach out, be compassionate and have open, non-judgmental conversations.
We here at Sekeres Price want to be part of the solution.
If you or someone you care about is struggling, you can find supports and services near you at helpstartshere.gov.bc.ca. And you can also watch powerful real-life stories of recovery on Help Starts Here website. In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there at 50 West Cordova.
Our next guest is brought to you by the Arnold Palmer Design Whistler Golf Club, reminding you that tee times for anytime during the 2024 season can be booked online right now. Get those tee times reserved early because you want to avoid the disappointment. Busy course. If you have a group of 12 or more, enter the Arnie's Army Golf Getaway, where you and 11 friends can play for free. To book a tee time or enter the contest, visit whistlergolf.com. Looking forward to getting there next week.
Indeed.
Our next guest is a former Vancouver Canuck TSN hockey analyst, the one and only Mr. Frank Corrado. How are you?
I'm good, boys. I'm good. It's can I start with a quick little story?
Please.
Sure.
Okay. So being from Toronto, and I may have told you guys this in the past, but being from Toronto, living in Vancouver a little bit, this is the biggest difference I noticed between the two cities. In Toronto, if someone asks you what you do, you tell them you're an accountant, you're a lawyer, you're a police officer, whatever it is you do, that's what you tell them. In Vancouver, if someone asks you what you do, you would say, I go to yoga 3 times a week, like to jog the seawall, and I get to Stanley Park a couple days a week as well.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a difference between the two cities as far as, when someone asks you what you do in Toronto, I think they just want to know how much money you make. I think in Vancouver, they basically just want to know, do you have a life or do you have any hobbies?
Right. Tell Saravelli that. He seems to be a rich guy to wipe her ass with hundreds or something.
In Vancouver, it's more the what do you do is
to work.
How fit are you? Basically,
How fit are you?
Yeah.
No.
What's your Whoop score?
Here, people work to live. In Toronto, people live to work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because in Toronto, you're in the rat race,
Yeah.
right? You're pressed up against someone on the TTC, making your way into the office.
Rush hour on Fridays, 11:30 a.m. That's
In
what time
Vancouver.
most
That's right.
people are cutting out at around 11:30
That's right.
every single Friday.
There's no such thing as rush hour in Toronto anymore. It's just a constant, steady
Constant.
flow,
Yeah, no, exactly.
never moving
Yeah,
anywhere.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, the could have used a few more transportation engineers in that town. No, I'm dead serious.
Yeah,
I knew one who said, they didn't do enough consulting early on, and
We could go on this. We could go on this for hours because they never anticipated anything to get built outside of Yonge Street and Avenue Road.
That's
and now there's like one subway line that goes east-west. It's a joke what's going on. Anyways, what are you gonna do? It's all good. We get by. There's worse things happening.
For those who are unfamiliar, if you need to get south from the very busy Highway 401 into downtown Toronto, you have highways on both the west and east perimeters that are pretty much packed at all times. And then you have like 2 just city streets that you can take. If you're up for like an hour long red light to red light to red light.
And there's a long history. There's a long history of why that is. And the Gardner, I don't know what the Gardner equivalent in Vancouver would be. I guess it's what goes right through Rogers Arena. There's that road. I can't even remember.
That's
Georgia.
just a viaduct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Anyway, it's like that's down to like two lanes for the next 14 years. So good luck with that.
Well, the inching along, just city streets is also a Vancouver thing because
I learned in Vancouver.
Yes.
Oh yeah, you could get caught in some red light situations there, or like have a bridge situation, and you're like pulling your hair out. So I learned that, even though it's not the highways per se.
Getting to the highway from downtown on a busy summer afternoon, that can be a while. Here in this town, we are not devoid of
JT
traffic.
Miller should take a boat from West Van
He should take a helicopter.
Falls
I mean,
Creek.
they're getting rich enough that he should just buy a helicopter and land it in the one empty lot in downtown Vancouver, right across the street from Rogers Arena, and that could be his commute to work.
Yeah.
We digress.
Yes, we do.
Frank, Canucks Twitter is undefeated. It's a phrase you're fond of. It reared its head again this week with your boy Luke Gazdic.
Did it ever? My goodness. Listen, Luke's a friend of mine. I think he does a great job. But at some point, I was lucky that I grew up in Canucks Twitter, let's call it, because I had Twitter when I got drafted by the team, and I got to see it. And, like everyone stubs their toe at one point with Canucks Twitter, and you learn how to navigate it. But, man, it's just, you can't paint everyone with the same brush. There's a lot of, it's a very passionate fan base in Vancouver. I always say this, it's a very knowledgeable fan base in Vancouver because there's people that really take an interest in the team. And if you're going to go on, Canucks Twitter and kind of say something that's maybe false, there's the stats and the proof to kind of go against your point or support your point. Like there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of knowledge, but there also is, there's an ugly side to everything, but it's important to not kind of paint them the same. And I think, Luke's he's good. He's going to move on and learn from it. And at one point or another, I think everyone kind of runs into Canucks Twitter a little bit.
How did you know not to, because you do a great job of being objective, which I think people here really appreciate. Like your boy Koliakovo there, blue and white is the only thing that he sees. Like what made you decide you weren't going to go down that road?
I just think it's you call it how you see it. I think I got some good advice early on where actually I'll give Jeff O'Neill a lot of credit. Like Jeff called me early on when I started out.
And he's a blue and white guy too. Like he believes blue and white only as well.
For sure. But he kind of told me, is like, if something's bad, you got to say it's bad. If something's good, you got to say it's good. Like you can't kind of sit on the fence too much because, if everyone's seeing something and you're the analyst and you're not saying it, like, your credibility is going to come into question a little bit. It's okay to analyze hockey with an objective mind. It is. That's our job. You don't want to get into too much of the bias, I guess. Either way, you can still be passionate and be fair. And I think that's kind of, what I try to do. And I think a lot of people try to do.
About this? Did Ray ever opine with you about any of this?
Ray has been, first of all, I was a massive fan of Ray, even going back to when I played. I always valued Ray's opinion. And I really respected this about Ray is morning skate. Ray would walk into the room and he would talk to you. And it felt like you were talking to a player. It never felt like you were talking to a broadcaster. So I always appreciated our conversations. And where Ray has really helped me is with the color commentary. Just understanding like how to prepare for a game, things you're looking for, things you want to have on your sheet, because you have a sheet on each team, right? With a bunch of things like, what do you want to have ready to go game wise? But I think Ray has always done a great job, even in the Toronto market when he was on, overdrive every single day doing Leaf games. If they were playing great, he said they were playing great and he told you why. And if they were playing like junk, like he wasn't afraid to say it. Like I think that's the most important thing, and that's what you want to be known for. And you know what? Like, so take the Canucks, this year, and we've been doing this now for a year and a half, let's say. Things were not peachy for the Canucks when I first started doing this show with you guys, and we weren't afraid to kind of voice those opinions. And what we saw, the way this year has gone, I found myself getting ready to come on your show and saying, I think the last 4 or 5 weeks or appearances have been very positive about this team. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't, it's not like I couldn't find things, to say that were negative. They just weren't presenting itself. So it kind of, if the team's playing well and everything's going well, that's what you're talking about. If it's not going well, you have like an obligation to point that out because people can see it.
You just finished on the Memorial Cup in Saginaw, and we noted on Monday that Canucks prospect Josh Bloom, who we talked about last week, scored the Memorial Cup winning goal. We're going to get to a bunch of Canucks stuff here, but just a word or two about his tournament and whether or not you think we're looking at a player there for next year.
It could be. Very well could be. I thought that was his best game. The goal aside, I thought the final game was his best game. And he must listen to Sekeres Price, I'm telling you, because he probably does. Pre-game, post-game, all the time. Because after I said, no more beaver tails, I didn't see one more beaver tail.
No, really?
Didn't see it. So I don't know. Someone must be listening to Sekeres Price in his circle. But listen, I think his game is going to be simple. It's going to be effective. It's not going to be overly flashy. He works hard. He's in on the forecheck. I think there's something there in whatever role you can find for him. But like anything, it's up to him to progress into that. But for him to score the Memorial Cup game-winning goal right in front of the net, kind of digging away at it, I think that kind of embodies what he's like. Like he's a tenacious guy. He's going to get to dirty areas and he's going to be, a straight line kind of hardworking guy. That's what I saw from him throughout the course of the tournament.
I still think the Canucks are missing that guy. So I think a fourth line, forward that digs and is aggressive like that.
Yeah.
Like I think that is
A fourth line Connor Garland. to
Yeah,
some degree.
yeah, exactly.
Hey, Frank, it sounds like the Canucks are taking a shot here at re-signing Elias Lindholm. I'd like your take on that on two fronts. Number one, they stacked the three centers this year, and it still wasn't enough to get past Edmonton. And if they are going to commit something in the neighborhood of 7x7 to Elias Lindholm, that probably means they're not going to be able to fill needs on the wing or bring everyone back on defense. What's your take? How sensible is it to, see if you can re-sign Elias Lindholm, knowing your other needs and knowing your finite cap space here?
I mean, I guess so. I don't have an issue with them trying to stack up the middle of the ice. I really don't. Like, I think there's a lot of teams that have success by doing that. Of course, cost is always going to have to be in mind with that. And if you do 7x7, now you're going to have, what do you have? 11 and change, 8 something in Miller, and 7 down the middle, which is not it's not uncommon, I guess, to have that much money in such an important position. I think you can make things work on the wing, but I think it's hard to make things work in the center ice position. So if you're going to prioritize one or the other, I'd be more leaning to prioritizing center ice and saying, okay, we can find other solutions on the wing. But center ice, a guy who wins a lot of faceoffs, a guy who is defensively responsible, a guy who can give you more offense than maybe we saw during his time in the regular season. I wouldn't be opposed to that. And if it is $7 million, okay, at least it's not 8, at least it's not 9. Like, this is probably a guy that was going into the start of the year, looking at more money than he's probably going to get after the way things went. So I wouldn't say it's a discount per se, but you're probably getting him for less than what he was anticipating getting if he had a massive year this year. He's 20, what is he, 30 or 31?
29, he'll be 30 in December.
Yeah. So that's the only thing. How much term are you willing to give him? Do you want him till he's 37? Because now you're tied into him for a long time, and the cap's going to go up. Percentage of the cap is going to change, but that's the only thing I'd be weary about is how much term do you want to give that guy? And if there's more term out there for him elsewhere, do you risk losing him and letting him walk and saying, okay, you guys take the risk on the term?
Yeah, I'm almost willing to pay him more on a 5-year deal, but 7 years is too much.
Yeah,
too much.
Now,
too much for
when
me.
you've got the whole league at your disposal as a UFA, you can pick and choose and say, oh, well, these guys need a second line center, and I would probably play with so-and-so and so-and-so. Here it's a little more up in the air as to who he plays with. Now, he was quote-unquote the third line center here. You could make the argument he had better wingers than Elias Pettersson, though, for much of the year when he was playing with Joshua and Garland, though. Do you think that's
bizarre, by the way, Blake?
Yeah.
Not to cut you off though. That's one thing I would like to see different for next year is, Pettersson, he's on paper a lot of times the first line center. Why is it there's Mikheyev and I don't know who else was Höglander? I would like to see, and I guess that goes to your point.
Lafferty was there.
Yeah. I guess that goes to your point about prioritizing wingers a little more than prioritizing the center. It's maybe we can actually load up a first line that looks more like a first line instead of just putting it there on paper, and actually giving Pettersson a little more to work with. There's a lot of validity to that. I think, honestly, when it comes to Lindholm, if I could get it for 6.5, if I could get it in the 6s, I would feel more comfortable. And I know it's just $500,000, but I think just having it look like a 6 instead of a 7 might even help things a little more.
You got to draw the line somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Power play by committee. Rick Tocchet's going to coach it some. Yogi Svechkovsky's going to coach it some. The Twins are going to coach it some. They coached power play 2 last year. Now we'll move on up. And, of course, there will be a lot of input from players, namely JT Miller. Power play coaching by committee. How does that strike you, Frank Corrado?
What did Louis Domingue say? Not the best? I think that's where I stand on power play coaching by committee. I think there can be input from other people, but ultimately there needs to be one vision, one plan, and the players have to execute on it. I'll tell you a little story on why I feel that way. I was always coached, let's say, all the years I played. Here's your power play coach, and this is how we're going to do things, and this is our schemes, this is what we want to accomplish. And not that I was a big power play guy, but I paid attention in those meetings. I understood what was happening. A lot of times I'd be on, second power play unit, let's say. And everyone was most of the time on the same page. Even if we didn't execute, at least, we were kind of all on the same page as long as the coach wasn't babbling all over himself trying to communicate that to us. When I went to play in Sweden, played for Modo, first day I get there, the players that are on the power play say, hey, we're going to go do our power play meeting now. I said, oh, okay, great. So I go to the other room. We got the whiteboard out, and there's 5 of us sitting there. And one of the players starts doing the meeting. And he starts going, okay, I think we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And then another player starts piping up like, no, maybe we should do this. And no, I like doing that. And I looked around and I said, shouldn't we wait for the coach to get here to start this? And he goes, no, they let us do the power play here. And our power play was probably negative 8% that year. It was awful because all it was a bunch of different opinions, a bunch of different people that like to do this because this worked with this team last year. Or no, I like to do this because this was good that year. Just never meshing together. And myself and the other import defenseman who played the power play, we kind of came to the realization together that players like to be coached. Players like to have that one kind of voice that tells you, this is how we're doing this. And yes, you're going to have some input. Yes, you're going to be able to tweak things as you go along, but it always kind of has to have that, it has to have that one mission behind it. And I think too many people, too many cooks, it's like that it's like playing broken telephone. Like too many things can get miscommunicated to the players that actually have to do it on the ice. So I am of the belief that yes, players like to be coached. That's not going to be an issue. The players will be coached. It's just it's better when it's clear in this is my philosophy and this is how we're going to do it. And yes, you work together a little bit, but ultimately, it comes down to that one person who's calling the shots in that situation.
And the buck has to stop somewhere too, right? When there are issues, who's accountable for that? Who do you go to say, hey, there's an issue here, and you just want to know who you're talking to? But I mean, I would guess that's largely Rick Tocchet on the power play going forward.
Head coach, ultimate responsibility, I would think.
Yeah.
What do you think of Martin Necas?
He's a good player. I like the package. I like the skill set. I don't know if he was underutilized in Carolina.
That's the theory.
That's the theory.
Yeah. That's the thing is okay, underutilized. And the question I would ask is, he's skilled, more skilled than a lot of the players they have there. So why was he underutilized on a team that kind of needs that injection of skill? Mm-hmm. Which is interesting. But I think he's very talented. I played against him in the American League a little bit when he was in Charlotte. That would have been his first year pro. I thought he was really good there, and he made the jump, and things seemed pretty seamless for him. He's probably going to be what he was. Maybe not this year, because I think he played just under 80 games and he was just under 60 points maybe, but he's probably a 70-point guy.
Yeah, Saravalli's
given that skill set.
Yeah, Saravalli was saying the same thing. I was going to ask you, what do you think is the ceiling? Because I think
he's a 70-point guy. And maybe if you give him a little more opportunity and you put some people around him, maybe he is a point per game. But I don't know if I don't see him as a 90-point guy. Right. I don't even know if I see him as a point per game guy every year, but I like him as a player. I think he offers something. The way he skates, the way he handles the puck, he's got a good shot. I think there's something there. It just depends, depends on a lot of things. Who you're going to surround him with, how much you want to pay him, and how much term you want to have attached to that.
And a 70-point guy, probably high water marks 1 or 2 years above the 80-point mark. So you never know.
Yeah.
The other thing here, and his dad said this, but that maybe the Brind'Amour system doesn't suit him, whereas really Tocchet is almost the antithesis system-wise. right? I mean, like Brindamore, they want to throw everything at the net, right, Frank? And whereas Tocchet is very much a no, let's be selective and get quality shots. So, maybe that suits him better too.
Maybe, yeah. There could be something to be said for that. Carolina's a unique way of playing because even the way the decor plays, like, oh, we're in trouble, high flip. Oh, we're in trouble, like, let's just push it and kind of skate onto it. I feel like the forwards there don't necessarily have the puck a lot. It's not like the most creative type of system. What can you remind me? What is his dad? Like, is his dad someone? Because I keep hearing Necas' dad. What is this?
Dads are very prominent.
Just an involved parent.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Just, like calls. I don't know. Like when I hear so-and-so's dad, it's it is a little bit of a red flag for me. Like the over-involved dad in pro hockey. I think,
for sure.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a red flag, but that really shouldn't affect things at this level, I guess is my point. Like if your kid can play, he can play. And the playing should do the talking.
Tell that to Arturi Lehkonen. Remember his dad got involved in the Colorado business?
Oh, right. Yeah. Right. No, I mean, I think it's just his dad spoke to media back there in the Czech Republic, and that was that. So,
yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. I think if my dad did media, he'd be talking about like cigars and cured meats and
Your dad did do media. He did Sekeres Price some 10 years ago, and he sent.
And we talk sauce.
Yeah,
we talk sauce.
That's right. Yeah, big radio star.
Yeah. Lastly here, size up the cup final for me. And is there any part of you rooting for Roberto Luongo to get a ring?
You know what? I think, for sure. I would love to see that. Like he worked so hard as a player. You think about all the years where he had to play so many games and so many playoff runs, and even the years early in his career where he was grinding with the Florida Panthers through some lean years and still was kind of established as one of the best goalies in the league. I have nothing but respect for him and what he's kind of transitioned to in his second career. I think there's part of it is there. I find it super bizarre that there's this weird campaign that people in Canada need to get behind a Canadian team. Like, I think if you're a fan of Vancouver, you're a fan of Vancouver. Like, why would you be cheering for the Oilers? It makes no sense for me. The only thing I will say on that is if you want to see Connor McDavid win a Stanley Cup, I can buy into that. Like, I think that would be cool. I think it's something that should happen at some point, just for him to be considered among the league's greatest of all time. I think a Stanley Cup might have to go with that. So you would think that this is an opportunity for him to get that done. It's going to be an interesting series because I think you have a very complete, balanced team that plays physical, kind of can play anywhere you want in Florida, and you're going to have superstar power led up front by the Edmonton Oilers and a lot of players who are kind of playing their best hockey or playing within themselves right now. So it presents an interesting contrast of which narratives are kind of come to the forefront when everything's said and done.
Well, you enjoyed, Frank. We get hockey back here this weekend.
Yeah.
Looking at this week.
Yeah, it's been a long week.
I was
like a bye week or something.
Yeah.
I was forced to watch those Blue Jays Orioles games, the first two at least, which terrible. Second
terrible.
Really bad.
We excited for CFL?
Yes.
Back.
Missed last night's. We were golfing, but I will sit down and see some tonight, and certainly the Lions and Argos on Sunday. Very much looking forward to that.
All right, boys. Let me know if you want a little wager on that one.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah. All right. Let me know.
Give me the Lions to cover.
Brady, honestly, are sharp in the back there.
He was all over it. It's like he was waiting for me to say something.
He was.
Yeah.
Grady will bet you on the coin toss if you'd like, Frank.
Yes.
Perfect.
Thanks, Frank.
See you, boys.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.